The vastness of space stretched before Commander Zarr'kahn as he stood on the bridge of the Aegis Dominion, his warship cutting through the void with the silent precision of a predator. His 6 eyes scanned the holographic displays projected in the air around him, each showing detailed readouts of the new target, the third planet of a nondescript yellow star. Known to its inhabitants as Earth, it was an unremarkable world by galactic standards, teeming with primitive life, forms barely capable of spaceflight. To Zarr'kahn, it was nothing more than another conquest in a long line of victories. Or so he thought. Zarr'kahn had led his people, the Vakthar, to dominance over dozens of star systems. His species thrived on calculated precision, each decision weighed against countless variables to ensure absolute success. Their conquests were swift, efficient, and without mercy. Planets fell like dominoes beneath the weight of the Vakthar armadas, and Zarr'kahn's name had become a byword for victory among his peers. It was his cold, unrelenting nature that had made him one of the High Council's most trusted commanders. Yet, as the green and blue orb loomed larger on the view screens, a flicker of unease crept into his mind, a sensation unfamiliar and unwelcome. Reports from the Vakthar's scouting vessels painted a strange picture. The humans were not the first species to dabble in interstellar expansion, but there was something different about them. They were reckless, their technology cobbled together with an almost maddening disregard for aesthetics or efficiency. Yet, despite their apparent inelegance, humanity had expanded farther and faster than any species in its developmental stage. It was their audacity that had drawn the Vakthar's attention. A species this chaotic and bold could not be allowed to grow unchecked. "Commander," a voice interrupted his thoughts. It was the ship's tactical officer, a Vakthar with the soft green scales of a junior rank. "The lead scout has engaged one of their outlying colonies. Resistances unexpected." Zarr'kahn turned sharply, his eyes narrowing. "Unexpected? Explain." The officer hesitated, claws tapping nervously against the console. "The humans have fortified their position. Initial scans detected rudimentary defenses, but they've employed adaptive tactics. The scout reports heavy casualties." Zarr'kahn approached the central console, his movements fluid and deliberate. He stared at the tactical display, where a miniature battlefield played out in real time. A Vakthar scout ship circled a human colony built into the craggy surface of an asteroid, its sleek energy weapons firing in precise bursts. But the humans didn't respond in predictable patterns. Instead of rigid formations or retreat, their ships darted in erratic swarms, using the asteroid's jagged terrain as cover. Zarr'kahn watched as a Vakthar fighter drifted too close to a crevice, only to be obliterated by a hidden missile battery. He frowned. This was not how primitives behaved. Most species crumbled at the first display of Vakthar might, surrendering in fear or lashing out with ineffective bravado. These humans fought as if they had studied the Vakthar, anticipating their moves and exploiting every weakness. The sheer audacity of it rankled Zarr'kahn's pride. "Recall the scout," he ordered. "This engagement is beneath us." The tactical officer hesitated again. "Commander, the scout reports they cannot withdraw. The humans have trapped them." Zarr'kahn's jaw tightened. "Trapped? By humans?" His clawed hand hovered over the console, and for the first time in years, he felt a flicker of doubt. He activated the ship's communication link to the scout vessel. Static crackled before the voice of its captain came through, strained and panicked. "This is Captain Vess of the Vanguard Spear. We are under heavy fire. The humans have." A sudden explosion cut through the transmission, followed by silence. Zarr'kahn clenched his fist, his claws digging into his palm. The bridge crew remained silent, their eyes fixed on their consoles as the realization settled over them. The humans had not only resisted, but destroyed one of their own. A rare and bitter loss. "Prepare the fleet," Zarr'kahn said, his voice low and measured. "We will crush this colony and show these humans the price of defiance." As the Vakthar fleet descended upon the asteroid, Zarr'kahn couldn't shake the gnawing sense that something was amiss. He prided himself on his ability to read a battlefield, to predict his enemies' actions before they even conceived them. But these humans were erratic, unpredictable. It was as if their minds operated on an entirely different logic, one driven not by reason, but by something far more primal. It intrigued and unsettled him in equal measure. The battle began in earnest as the Vakthar warships unleashed their full might, beams of searing energy carving through the asteroid's surface. The human ships, outnumbered and outgunned, darted like insects around a bonfire. Yet they fought with a ferocity that defied their limited resources, using every trick and tactic at their disposal. They turned mining equipment into improvised weapons, hacked into Vakthar communication systems to sow confusion, and even rigged their own ships to explode in kamikaze attacks that damaged the Vakthar fleet far more than anticipated. Watching from the Aegis Dominion, Zarr'kahn felt an unfamiliar pang in his chest. Admiration. The humans were nothing like the other species he had conquered. Their strategies were not born of superior technology or physical strength, but of sheer ingenuity and a reckless disregard for their own survival. Every decision they made seemed driven by an unshakable will to endure, no matter the cost. By the time the asteroid was reduced to rubble, the Vakthar fleet had suffered losses unlike anything Zarr'kahn had seen in decades. The humans had forced them to fight tooth and claw for every inch, and though the Vakthar had ultimately prevailed, the victory felt hollow. As the debris of the human colony drifted into the void, Zarr'kahn stood in silence, his hands clasped behind his back. His crew avoided his gaze, their usual confidence tempered by the reality of what they had witnessed. For the first time in his career, Zarr'kahn felt a sliver of doubt about his ability to crush an enemy. These humans were unlike any foe he had faced. Their unpredictable nature, their capacity for rapid adaptation, and their unyielding will to fight, it was a combination that defied everything he understood about warfare. A transmission interrupted his thoughts. A human voice crackled through the ship's communication system, distorted but unmistakably defiant. "You think you've won, alien, but you don't know what you've started." Zarr'kahn stared at the display, his expression unreadable. He reached out and terminated the transmission, his mind churning with questions. This wasn't over, and he knew it. Humanity would not surrender so easily. They would fight, tooth and nail, until their last breath. And for the first time, Zarr'kahn wondered if he had underestimated his prey. The vast chamber of the Vakthar War Council aboard the Aegis Dominion hummed with tension as Zarr'kahn stood before the central tactical display. Around him, officers murmured in low, uneasy tones, their eyes flickering to the holographic projections of Earth's colonies. The humans' Defiance had shifted the tone of this campaign from a routine conquest to an unfolding enigma. Zarr'kahn's 6 eyes scanned the data, but for all his analytical brilliance, he could not find the pattern he sought. It was as if the humans thrived in chaos, weaving disorder into strategy with maddening precision. The commander's tail flicked against the polished floor as he studied the latest reports. 3 engagements had followed the destruction of the asteroid colony, each more costly than the last. The Vakthar's numerical and technological superiority had won out in the end, but the humans had exacted a toll that was impossible to ignore. They had deployed tactics no rational species would consider, sacrificing ships, resources, even entire outposts, to achieve small but devastating victories. It was their unpredictability that unnerved him the most. What kind of species willingly set their own vessels ablaze to cripple an enemy? Zarr'kahn's thoughts were interrupted by the arrival of his intelligence officer, a Vakthar whose pale scales marked her as a member of the analytical caste. She approached with a controlled urgency, clutching a data crystal in her talons. "Commander, we have completed a psychological analysis of the humans, based on intercepted communications and observed behavior during battle," she said, placing the crystal into the central console. "I believe you will find the results illuminating." Zarr'kahn inclined his head, gesturing for her to continue. The holographic display shifted, revealing a web of data points and projections. As she spoke, the commander's unease deepened. "Humans are driven by a unique blend of instinct and intellect," the intelligence officer explained. "They possess a highly volatile emotional spectrum, which influences their decision-making in ways that defy conventional logic. Unlike most species who prioritize survival above all, humans exhibit a curious willingness to embrace risk, even at the cost of self-destruction, if it serves a larger goal. Zarr'kahn studied the data with an intensity that silenced the murmurs around him. The human psychological profile was a contradiction. A species capable of calculated brilliance, yet governed by impulses that seemed reckless to the point of madness. He saw it now in their battle strategies, chaos masquerading as genius, or perhaps the other way around. Fascinating, he muttered, more to himself than to his officers. They weaponize their own unpredictability. They force us to respond, to react, rather than anticipate. The intelligence officer nodded. Precisely, Commander. They are unlike any adversary we have encountered. Their ingenuity is fueled by desperation, their tactics by audacity. They seem to thrive on adversity, turning their weaknesses into strengths. Before Zarr'kahn could respond, an alert sounded across the chamber, drawing all eyes to the central display. A new engagement was unfolding near the icy moon of Europa. Vakthar forces had engaged a human fleet in what should have been a straightforward battle. Yet, as the holographic projection updated in real time, it became clear that the humans had once again defied expectations. The Vakthar ships were positioned in a textbook formation, their firepower concentrated on the human fleet. But the humans had anticipated this. Using the moon's frozen surface as cover, they had concealed a network of automated drones armed with explosive charges. As the Vakthar pressed their advantage, the drones emerged from the moon's crevices, targeting the exposed flanks of the alien fleet. Within minutes, the carefully constructed formation was in disarray. Zarr'kahn's claws dug into the edge of the console as he watched the scene unfold. The humans' plan was reckless, bordering on suicidal. The drones were not equipped with shielding, and their attacks came at the cost of their own destruction. But the chaos they sowed was enough to shift the tide of the battle. The Vakthar were forced into a retreat, abandoning a key strategic position. The chamber was silent as the projection faded, leaving only the grim aftermath of the skirmish. Zarr'kahn turned to face his officers, his expression unreadable. His pride as a commander warred with the growing realization that this campaign was unlike any he had faced before. The humans were not merely resisting. They were adapting, evolving with every encounter. "Send word to the High Council," he said at last. "Inform them that we require additional resources for this campaign, and prepare a full analysis of the humans' technological capabilities. I want to know how they're able to turn our own tactics against us." The officers exchanged uneasy glances before nodding in unison. As they dispersed, Zarr'kahn remained by the console, his mind racing. He had never needed to request reinforcements before. To do so was an admission of vulnerability, a crack in the facade of invincibility that the Vakthar prided themselves on. But Zarr'kahn was not so arrogant as to ignore the reality before him. The humans were dangerous in ways he had not anticipated. A faint vibration in the deck beneath his feet signaled the arrival of another transmission. This time, it was from one of the Vakthar's advanced reconnaissance units. The message was brief but chilling. The humans had begun to experiment with Vakthar technology. Debris from previous battles had been salvaged and repurposed with astonishing speed, integrated into human vessels in ways that defied comprehension. The message included visual data of a human ship outfitted with Vakthar energy shielding, a technology that had taken his species centuries to perfect. Zarr'kahn's mind churned. This was no longer a simple campaign of conquest. The humans were turning their defeats into opportunities, learning from every encounter. They were not merely surviving. They were thriving under pressure, like a blade forged in fire. As the hours passed, the commander reviewed every scrap of data available on the humans. Their history was a litany of conflict and resilience, a species that had clawed its way from the brink of extinction time and again. Wars, natural disasters, and self-inflicted crises had honed them into a paradox, fragile yet unbreakable, reckless yet ingenious. The more he learned, the more a troubling thought took root in his mind. Perhaps the humans were not an anomaly to be studied and subdued. Perhaps they were something more profound, a force of nature, chaotic and unstoppable. When the next battle came, Zarr'kahn knew he would face it with a new perspective. This was no longer about domination. It was a war of survival, and for the first time in his career, he was unsure if victory was possible. The humans were not just an enemy. They were a question that defied answers, a problem that refused to be solved. As the stars beyond the viewport glimmered coldly, Zarr'kahn felt the weight of his realization settle upon him. The Vakthar had come to conquer, but they might leave broken. For the first time, he understood the stakes, and a part of him whispered a truth he could not yet voice. Perhaps this was a fight the Vakthar could not win. The stars outside the viewport seemed to burn brighter than usual, their cold light casting long shadows across the bridge of the Aegis Dominion. Commander Zarr'kahn stood at his usual place, his imposing figure silhouetted against the swirling cosmos. Yet there was an unfamiliar stillness in him, a tension that had grown with each encounter against the humans. The bridge crew worked quietly, their movements subdued, as if the weight of recent defeats had dampened the confidence that once filled the Vakthar Fleet. A soft chime interrupted the silence, signaling an incoming transmission. Zarr'kahn's clawed hand moved to the console with measured deliberation. The screen flickered to life, revealing the face of High Counselor Vakthar, a Vakthar of elder lineage whose scaled visage bore the weight of countless campaigns. His deep voice resonated through the chamber. "Commander Zarr'kahn," Vakthar began, his tone clipped. "The Council has reviewed your request for reinforcements. Explain to me why one of our most celebrated commanders struggles against a species barely capable of interstellar travel." Zarr'kahn straightened, his expression impassive, though the sting of the rebuke was unmistakable. "Counselor, these humans are unlike any foe we have encountered. Their unpredictability and capacity for rapid adaptation have undermined our tactical superiority. They exploit every weakness, often at great cost to themselves. But the results are devastating." Vakhthar's eyes narrowed. A primitive species has no place defying the Vakthar. If they are resourceful, it is only because you allow them to be. Crush them swiftly, or the Council will find someone who can. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving Zarr'kahn alone with the weight of his growing doubt. He turned his gaze back to the tactical display, where the human forces had begun to consolidate near their home system. The planet Earth stood at the heart of their defenses, a glowing orb surrounded by a patchwork fleet of human vessels and scavenged Vakthar technology. The sight filled him with a strange mix of frustration and admiration. "Commander," his tactical officer said cautiously, breaking the silence, "the humans have sent another message. It is unusual." Zarr'kahn's eyes narrowed. "Play it." The bridge filled with the crackling sound of a human voice, distorted but laced with defiance. "Vakthar Commander, this is Captain Elena Reyes of the Resolute Dawn. We've studied your tactics. We've seen your strength. But strength alone doesn't win wars." There was a pause, and when she spoke again, her voice carried a steely determination. "If you come for Earth, you will not leave. We fight for more than survival. We fight because we refuse to kneel." The transmission ended, leaving a silence that felt heavier than any explosion. Zarr'kahn's claws tapped against the console as he replayed her words in his mind. "We fight because we refuse to kneel." It was a sentiment that resonated with him in a way he did not expect. The Vakthar fought for conquest, for the glory of their empire. But these humans fought for something more profound, something that transcended logic or strategy. It was a concept as alien to Zarr'kahn as he was to them. "Commander," the intelligence officer said softly, her voice tinged with concern. "What are your orders?" For a long moment, Zarr'kahn said nothing. Then he turned to face his crew, his 6 eyes gleaming with a clarity that silenced the room. "We attack," he said, his voice firm. "Prepare the fleet for an assault on their homeworld. We will meet them on their own soil and end this campaign once and for all." The Vakthar armada moved swiftly, their sleek ships cutting through space with precision. The journey to Earth was tense, every officer acutely aware of the stakes. Zarr'kahn stood at the center of the command deck, his gaze fixed on the growing orb of blue and green that now dominated the viewscreen. For all his doubts, he knew that this battle would define his legacy, victory or ruin. As the fleet entered Earth's orbit, the humans were waiting. Their ships formed a defensive grid, a patchwork assembly of ingenuity and desperation. They were outnumbered and outgunned, but their formation was tight, their resolve unshaken. The Vakthar opened fire first, their energy weapons carving through space in brilliant arcs. The humans responded with everything they had: missiles, particle beams, even modified mining lasers. The battle erupted into chaos, ships darting and weaving in a deadly dance of destruction. Zarr'kahn directed the engagement with the precision of a master strategist, his commands swift and decisive. Yet the humans continued to defy him. They used their planet's gravity to slingshot ships into unexpected attack vectors, sacrificing smaller vessels to create openings for devastating counterstrikes. Vakthar's ships fell, one after another, to tactics that defied every rule of warfare. Then came the moment Zarr'kahn had been dreading. A human vessel, heavily damaged and trailing fire, broke through the Vakthar lines. It hurtled toward the Aegis Dominion, its engines glowing with an unnatural intensity. The humans had weaponized their own ship, turning it into a projectile. Zarr'kahn barked orders, and the ship was destroyed just before impact, but the explosion rocked the command deck, sending crew members sprawling. As the dust settled, Zarr'kahn rose to his feet, his gaze locked on the viewscreen. The humans were relentless, their fleet battered but unyielding. He could see their desperation, their raw defiance, and beneath it all, a will that refused to be broken. In that moment, Zarr'kahn felt the weight of his realization settle over him like a shroud. The humans were not fighting for survival alone. They were fighting for something far greater, something he could not fully understand but could no longer ignore. "Commander," his intelligence officer said quietly, her voice trembling, "the fleet is sustaining heavy losses. If we continue, we may—" Zarr'kahn raised a hand to silence her. His gaze remained fixed on the battle, his mind racing. The humans had forced him to question everything he thought he knew about war, about strength, about victory. And now, as his fleet faltered against their defiance, he faced a choice. With a deep breath, Zarr'kahn made his decision. "Order a retreat," he said, his voice steady. "Pull back to the outer system. Let the humans have their victory." The bridge crew froze, stunned by his command. But Zarr'kahn's tone brooked no argument. Slowly, the Vakthar fleet began to withdraw, their ships vanishing one by one into the depths of space. As the Aegis Dominion turned away from Earth, Zarr'kahn stood in silence, his thoughts a whirlwind of questions and doubts. He had underestimated the humans, not because of their technology or their numbers, but because he had failed to grasp the essence of what they were. They were dangerous, not because of their strength, but because of their unyielding spirit. For the first time in his career, Zarr'kahn felt something he had never known before. It was not defeat, nor shame, but something far more unsettling. It was respect,